What if everything you've been taught about why things are scarce? You know, your money, your resources, your opportunities.
Right.
What if that's actually a design choice by institutions rather than some fundamental rule of nature?
It's a huge question to start with.
It is, yeah. But imagine for a second that the limitations you feel every day aren't physical inevitabilities.
Yeah.
They're structural decisions.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are tackling a massive, pretty mind-bending document today. It's titled The Full Stack Civilization Redesign Framework.
Which is quite the title.
Yeah, it really is. And our mission today is to unpack this blueprint for a complete civilizational upgrade. We're looking at a proposed transition from what the author calls a scarcity-mediated, institution-dependent civilization to an abundance-enabled, autonomy-centered civilization.
We really need to frame the stakes right out of the gate here, though.
Go for it.
Because this project is not about incremental reform. It's not about inventing a shiny new gadget or just tweaking a tax policy. It is about systemic replacement.
Total replacement.
Yes. And I want to be clear for you listening, we are going to explore the mechanics and claims of this framework objectively today.
Absolutely.
We aren't here to endorse this blueprint or tell you it's the definitive way forward. Our goal is to give you the pure, unfiltered ideas from the source material so you can weigh them for yourself.
Yeah, because it touches on some pretty heavy political and systemic changes. We're just looking at the mechanics. And there are 5 interlocking layers to achieve this transformation, touching on everything from energy and economics to education and governance.
So where do we begin?
Let's start right at the foundation. The first layer is what's called the physical abundance layer, or the material substrate of society. And this brings us to a really bold claim.
The scarcity claim.
Yeah. The underlying premise here is that scarcity is largely institutional, not thermodynamic.
Yeah.
Thermodynamic is a heavy word to drop right away.
It is, but it's crucial to understand the whole framework.
So break that down for us.
Well, when we talk about thermodynamics here, we're talking about the fundamental laws of physics and energy. The idea is that we aren't actually running out of the physical capacity or the literal atoms to provide for everyone on Earth.
The universe has plenty of matter and energy.
Exactly. The scarcity you and I experience is, according to this, a management problem. We are organizing our resources in a way that artificially creates limits.
Usually to maintain control or profit.
Right.
So it's basically a paperwork problem, not a physics problem.
In a sense, yes. And the factual mechanics proposed to overcome this are fascinating. It relies heavily on combining immense localized energy density with a completely reimagined manufacturing pipeline.
Let's talk about the energy side first.
Sure, this means deploying small modular reactors, SMRs, alongside next-generation solar and advanced batteries.
So instead of a massive centralized power grid owned by a regional monopoly.
Imagine a neighborhood or a small town generating massive amounts of its own power independently.
And once you have that cheap, abundant, localized energy, you can change how you make things.
Completely.
The document points to closed-loop recycling, microfactories, and advanced CNC machining. For anyone unfamiliar, CNC stands for Computer Numerical Control. It's basically automated, high-precision milling and machining.
Right. And when you shrink those machines down and make them cheaper, you drastically lower the capital barriers to entry.
You don't need a billion-dollar factory in another country to make complex parts anymore.
No, you can do it in a garage. Add to that vertical integration where you control every step of the process from raw material to finished product, and you basically collapse the cost of making physical goods.
Wait, if this scales up, industrial capacity essentially becomes a background utility.
Like water out of a tap.
Or internet bandwidth. You don't think about the global fiber optic network when you stream a movie. It just exists, and you tap into it. The implication here is that the actual capacity to manufacture physical goods can become cheaper than the raw materials themselves.
That is the exact analogy to keep in mind. Industrial capacity as a utility means the power to create physical goods is decentralized.
Which means you are no longer reliant on massive, distant megacorporations to get the physical items you need to survive.
Exactly.
There's another concept in this layer that caught my eye. Remediation integration. The idea that production can actually become ecological.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But how does that actually work mechanically? Because historically, let's be real, more factories mean more pollution.
It sounds counterintuitive until you look at the closed-loop model.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Imagine a local microfactory that requires water for cooling its machines. In a remediation integrated system, that factory doesn't just draw clean water and dump dirty water.
That's the old model.
Right. Instead, it's designed so that the intake process actively filters local polluted river water, uses it, and the byproduct of its specific manufacturing process actually neutralizes the initial toxins.
Meaning it outputs water that's cleaner than it found it?
Exactly. Or imagine a direct air carbon capture system that uses the captured carbon to manufacture the physical chassis of the products it sells.
Oh, wow.
The manufacturing process itself becomes the environmental cleanup mechanism.
Okay, so we have this localized, clean, practically free manufacturing capacity. But if anyone can make anything anywhere, how do we organize it without descending into total chaos?
That brings us to layer 2, the open standard economic model.
The coordination layer.
Yes.
The phrase used in the source here is RISCV for civilization. Let's translate that for everyone, because RISCV is a very specific piece of computer engineering jargon.
It is.
Think of the processor inside your phone or laptop. For decades, the basic alphabet that told those processors how to think, the instruction set architecture, was owned by a few massive companies.
And if you wanted to build a chip, you had to pay them steep licensing fees.
Right, but then RISCV came along and created an open source alphabet. Anyone can use it for free to design their own processors. It's not owned by Apple or Intel.
And we've seen how powerful that model is. Open standards fundamentally beat proprietary systems when they are royalty-free, academically seeded, community-improved, and vendor-agnostic.
Like Linux?
Exactly like Linux. Just look at how the Linux operating system became the backbone of the entire internet and most modern software. The vision here applies that exact same logic to physical reality.
So a universal open source operating system for CAD computer-aided design and CAM computer-aided manufacturing.
Yes, and OpenOS to run all those microfactories we just talked about.
But building that kind of software and hardware infrastructure takes massive capital. Usually you go to venture capitalists or a government, which instantly puts the control back into the hands of a few central institutions.
Which is exactly what this framework tries to avoid. The financial engine proposed is a crowdfunding ratchet.
A crowdfunding ratchet.
Instead of seeking billions from a few massive investors, the model proposes a microfunding structure. Just $1 a month from 100 million global contributors.
That's almost like a global Patreon or Wikipedia model.
Very.
But instead of funding a deep dive show or an online encyclopedia, we are funding the literal blueprints for physical civilization.
Precisely. And the mechanics of that $1 a month create a massive ratchet effect.
Because a ratchet only moves in one direction.
Right. It locks in progress. With continuous microfunding, you scale up research and development without giving away equity or control.
And that leads to compounding intellectual property that belongs to the public.
Yes, that public IP then drives a continuous automation flywheel, making the tech better and cheaper, which attracts more contributors.
So if I'm understanding this right, the implication is that you, the listener, could take your $1 a month and instead of subscribing to some random streaming service, you literally own a piece of a publicly owned intellectual infrastructure.
That's the vision.
This is designed to completely bootstrap human civilization and render incumbent proprietary vendors obsolete. You and millions of others are funding an open-source library of physical production.
It's a profound shift from a system of enclosure where ideas and tools are locked behind patents and paywalls to a system of the commons.
Right.
But there is a massive bottleneck here.
Which is?
Having open factories and open IP is entirely useless if people don't know how to operate them. Or worse, if people are still psychologically conditioned to be dependent on traditional institutions.
Which perfectly sets up the third layer.
The cognitive redesign.
Exactly. The term used is education as autonomy engineering. And man, this section offers a pretty brutal diagnosis of modern education.
It does. The critique is that the current educational system is essentially a factory for compliance.
Yeah.
Modern education, in this view, simply produces compliant workers, reproduces social hierarchy, artificially rations credentials, and ultimately maintains our dependence on large institutions.
It's not designed to make you free.
No, it's designed to make you a manageable gear in the machine.
So the alternative isn't just adding a coding class to the curriculum. It's a total overhaul.
A completely different paradigm.
The argument is that education shouldn't be workforce training. It should be sovereignty training. The individual becomes the civilization replication infrastructure.
And the specifics of how they propose teaching this are fascinating.
Let's break down those specifics, starting with the logic linguistics backbone. There is a strong emphasis on using Lojban alongside formal semantics.
Yeah, that's a really unique element.
Let's do a quick explainer on Lojban, because that is a very niche concept.
Yeah.
Think of Lojban like a programming language, but for human speech.
Right.
In English, we have double meanings, vague idioms, and structural ambiguities. If I say, I saw the man with the telescope, did I use a telescope to see him, or did he have a telescope?
It's ambiguous.
Exactly.
Mm.
Lojban eliminates that. It is mathematically precise. It is impossible to be vague or misunderstood if you speak it correctly.
The idea is to have dual language instruction from a young age, blending natural language with this purely logical language.
Why, though?
Because if you understand the mathematical structure of language, it fundamentally changes how you process information. It fosters what the text calls compositional thinking.
What does compositional thinking actually look like in practice?
It's the ability to look at any complex system, whether it's a car engine, a piece of software, or a political ideology, and instantly break it down into its absolute smallest fundamental building blocks.
So you don't just see the finished product.
Right, you see how the pieces compose the whole. If you can think compositionally, you can reverse engineer almost anything.
And to accelerate that kind of thinking, they propose integrating augmented reality AR for enhanced spatial reasoning.
Yes.
Imagine a kid wearing AR glasses, physically pulling apart a virtual combustion engine in their living room to see how the gears interlock.
And they also bring up EEG-informed adaptive pacing.
That's where it gets into deeply advanced territory. EEG refers to monitoring electrical activity in the brain.
Correct. The concept implies using non-invasive brainwave monitoring to adapt to the learning speed precisely to the student's cognitive state in real time.
So if the system senses you are frustrated or losing focus,
It slows down or changes the approach, and if you are in a flow state, it accelerates.
that's wild. There's also the concept of a personal long-term RAG memory for every student.
RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Right, a very current AI concept. Imagine an AI companion that isn't just a generic chatbot, but a perfectly tailored, localized database of everything you have ever read, learned, or experienced,
It acts as a second brain.
seamlessly assisting your recall and problem-solving over your entire lifetime.
And you combine that second brain with early exposure to robotics and CAD from the very beginning of education. All of this is focused through project-based, production-oriented tasks.
So the goal isn't to pass a standardized test.
No, the goal is to build something functional.
It sounds incredibly intense. You're basically training a generation of super engineers.
Yeah.
But the ultimate outcome stated here goes beyond just technical competence.
Yes, the most vital outcome is cognitive defense.
Cognitive defense.
By graduating individuals who deeply understand formal logic, who think compositionally, and who operate advanced machinery, you create citizens who can critically resist rhetorical manipulation.
Because if you understand formal logic and can see through semantic ambiguity using tools like Lojban, you cannot be easily swayed by a politician's vague promises.
Or a corporation's manipulative advertising.
You spot the logical fallacies instantly. You become an autonomous contributor to the intellectual property commons rather than a passive consumer.
Exactly. So we have physical abundance, an open coordination layer, and autonomous citizens.
Which brings us to a critical pivot point.
Layers 4 and 5.
Right. Legitimacy, governance, and the phase transition. If you have super smart, autonomous people who can manufacture anything they need almost for free, what happens to the government?
How does the old system react to suddenly being structurally irrelevant?
Exactly. This introduces the concept of a legitimacy collapse.
This is a delicate part of the framework, and we need to look at it completely impartially.
Agreed.
The premise is that we are currently experiencing a severe collapse in institutional legitimacy across the board. The indicators are things like rights nullification, legal incoherence where rules are applied arbitrarily, massive institutional capture by special interests, and the closure of avenues for peaceful correction.
And the underlying question there is, how do you distinguish legitimate authority from coercive domination when the legal system itself becomes a weapon used by those in power?
And this is where a very firm structural line is drawn by the authors.
Despite this massive collapse in legitimacy, the framework explicitly states there is no legitimate escalation trigger formula.
In plain English, it rejects violent revolution entirely.
It does, and the reasoning is structurally sound within the context of the framework. It doesn't rely on procedural escalation doctrines.
Let's define that for the listener.
A procedural escalation doctrine is basically a predetermined set of rules that says if the government does X, we are justified in using violence to do Y, like a checklist for rebellion.
Exactly. And the framework completely rejects that checklist approach.
Why?
Because human judgment is irreducible. Violence is historically tragic, morally costly, and profoundly destabilizing.
And more importantly, tearing the old system down violently usually just installs a new set of coercive rulers.
Right, so the strategy here must be entirely constructive, not insurrectionary. You don't fight the old system. You peacefully build a parallel system of abundance that makes the old coercive system structurally obsolete.
You starve the old system of its necessity.
Yes.
To understand how a society actually makes that leap without tearing itself apart, the text lays out a long arc model of human history, the 6 phases of civilization.
Let's give these phases some breathing room so you can see where we are on the timeline.
Phase 1 was survival. This is early humanity, where the only goal was literally avoiding predators and finding enough calories to make it to tomorrow.
Phase 2 was scarcity management. We developed agriculture and early settlements, figuring out how to ration limited food and shelter across a growing population.
Phase 3 brought industrial coordination. This is the Industrial Revolution. We figured out mass production, but it required thousands of people to stand in assembly lines, coordinating their labor to produce goods.
And phase 4 is knowledge asymmetry.
Which is roughly where we are transitioning out of right now.
Exactly. The internet exists, information is everywhere, but the ability to use that information, the algorithms, the high-frequency trading, the proprietary IP is heavily asymmetric. A few massive tech companies and institutions hold the keys, while the rest of us just use their platforms.
Which leads to Phase 5, automation and abundance. This is where AI and robotics reach a point where human labor is no longer the primary bottleneck for physical survival.
And finally, Phase 6.
The ultimate goal of this entire framework.
Autonomy and self-authorship. A society where material needs are met as a background utility and human effort is directed entirely by intrinsic motivation and free choice, not by the threat of starvation or homelessness.
But this raises a massive glaring question. It's what the text calls the institutional scarcity thesis.
Yes.
If Phase 5 automation and abundance is physically and technologically possible right now, today, why does scarcity persist? Why are people still struggling to pay rent or buy groceries?
That is the ultimate paradox. The framework argues that institutions essentially survive by rationing things.
They ration knowledge, legitimacy, opportunity, and resources.
Right. And in true conditions of abundance, this rationing logic completely collapses. If everyone has everything they need, the institutions that manage scarcity lose their power and their reason to exist.
So why don't we have this abundance yet? There are 5 distinct structural reasons synthesized here. Let's walk through them.
First, physical limits do still exist while we build the new infrastructure. We don't have SMRs and microfactories on every corner yet.
Second, institutional inertia is massive. Entire economies, legal systems, and global supply chains are built on the old model. Turning a ship that big takes immense time and effort.
Third, power naturally seeks to preserve itself. The organizations that benefit from the current bottleneck will not willingly give up their position.
Fourth, human status competition persists. Even if everyone has basic shelter and food, people will still compete for status, which can artificially create new forms of scarcity, like artificial exclusivity.
And fifth, this is the most critical one.
The transition itself actually destabilizes society before it stabilizes it.
As abundance rises and the artificial rationing begins to fail, this transition triggers massive counterforces.
The old institutions panic.
We see efforts to centralize control, the rise of surveillance capitalism to monitor behavior, regulatory capture to make grassroots innovation illegal, and general elite resistance.
The institutions face a choice. They must either shrink gracefully and cede control, or they must intentionally intensify their control to maintain the artificial scarcity that justifies their existence.
And this isn't dystopian fiction. It is a cold, structural analysis of how entrenched power reacts to a sudden influx of abundance.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, from thermodynamics to education to the collapse of institutional legitimacy.
It's a lot to process.
Let's bring all the puzzle pieces together and look at the final picture.
It is a remarkable cascade of cause and effect. If we follow the logic from the beginning, advancements in localized energy density enable advanced automated manufacturing.
And that manufacturing enables distributed local production in your own town or garage.
Right. And distributed production directly reduces your dependency on centralized institutions. You don't need global shipping conglomerates or massive retail chains to survive.
Meanwhile, the open standards, the RICV for civilization, ensure that no single corporate monopoly can capture this new production layer.
The crowd-funded intellectual property prevents the enclosure of the innovation layer, keeping the blueprints public and free.
And then education. That rigorous, lodge-band speaking, logic-based autonomy engineering trains people to actually operate this distributed production and resist the propaganda of the dying legacy institutions.
While the automation removes the human labor bottlenecks that usually slow things down.
The ultimate synthesis here is that true abundance fundamentally undermines scarcity-based hierarchies.
For this to work, the system must remain entirely open, it must be highly distributed, it must constantly enhance human autonomy, and it must meticulously avoid violent escalation, remaining ethically grounded and constructive at all times.
Everything we've unpacked today, the nuclear SMRs, the CNC microfactories, the cognitive array memories, the rejection of procedural escalation, they're all just individual tools in a larger toolbox.
The actual through line of the document is engineering material abundance and cognitive sovereignty to make coercive institutional scarcity structurally obsolete.
The unified aim, the compressed goal of the entire program, is simply autonomy at scale.
It is a staggering blueprint for a transition away from a civilization governed by the fear of scarcity.
It really is.
But as we step back from the mechanics of this framework, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. It's a question not explicitly resolved in the text, but deeply implied by its potential success.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say this framework perfectly achieves its goal. We completely eliminate institutional scarcity, we achieve absolute decentralized autonomy and total cognitive sovereignty through our localized power grids and microfactories.
So you are completely 100% self-sufficient.
Yes. What happens to the human need for community?
Oh, that is the ultimate question.
Will this total structural independence lead to a new, unprecedented kind of social isolation where we retreat into our perfectly curated, self-sustaining bubbles?
Because we don't strictly need each other to survive anymore.
Right. Or freed from the artificial pressures of economic survival and institutional coercion, will it finally allow us to connect, cooperate, and build communities purely out of genuine shared desire rather than out of economic necessity?
That's fascinating. It's something to deeply consider as you look at the systems governing your own life today. A massive question to chew on.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for taking this journey with us into the mechanics of abundance and autonomy. Keep questioning the structural choices around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.